June 2025. For the first time in history, two Chinese aircraft carriers operated simultaneously beyond the first island chain. The Liaoning and Shandong penetrated deep into the Pacific. Fighter jets launched from their decks. Japan tracked every move. US Pacific Command watched closely. This was China's message. The Pacific is no longer American water. But what happened next exposed something Beijing never wanted the world to see. A technological gap so wide that China's $13 billion carriers suddenly looked obsolete. American generals studied the deployment with microscopes. What they discovered changed everything about Pacific naval strategy. Picture this, June 2025. Two massive Chinese carrier strike groups operating hundreds of miles beyond the defensive line meant to contain China's naval forces. The CNS Liaoning, the CNS Shandong, each accompanied by destroyers, frigates, and support vessels, conducting full-flight operations with J-15 fighters and helicopters. Maritime expert Colonel Ray Powell called it historic. The simultaneous deployment east of the Philippines marked China's boldest power projection move ever. Japan's Defense Minister Gen Nakatani confirmed what everyone feared. Beijing aims to advance its operational capability of the distant sea and airspace. Translation: China is preparing to challenge US naval dominance in the Pacific, and Chinese carriers demonstrated they could operate far from home waters, far from land-based support, deep into what was once considered exclusive American territory. Here's what stunned Pentagon analysts. China's Navy now fields more than 370 ships. The US Navy, 296 battle force ships. On paper, China has the world's largest navy, and they're not stopping there. The Type 003 Fujian, commissioned in November 2024, represents a quantum leap. At over 80,000 tons, it rivals American supercarriers in size. Equipped with electromagnetic catapults, EMLS was previously exclusive to the USS Gerald R. Ford. The same technology took the US Navy decades to perfect. China installed it on their third carrier. Full-deck operation capability. J-35 stealth fighters, J-15T heavy fighters, KJ-600 early warning aircraft. Everything you'd find on an American carrier strike group. China aims for 6 carriers by 2030. Recent satellite imagery suggests the fourth carrier, Type 004, may feature nuclear propulsion. If true, it would place China in elite company. Only the US and France operate nuclear-powered carriers. From 0 operational carriers in 2012 to 3 in service by 2024, a fourth is under construction. This isn't gradual buildup. This is breakneck expansion designed to challenge American dominance within a decade. But here's where China's ambitions crashed into reality. US Navy intelligence discovered something critical Beijing desperately tried to hide. Despite impressive displays, Chinese carriers operate at massive disadvantages. Conventional propulsion. Both Liaoning and Shandong run on diesel fuel. They must refuel every 90 to 100 days. American carriers? Nuclear-powered. They operate for 20 to 25 years without refueling. Flight deck configuration. Chinese carriers can only generate about 60% the sortie rate of a 50-year-old US Navy carrier. The reason? Deck layout, elevator positioning, launch and recovery cycles. Things America perfected over 70 years. Pilot shortage. This is the killer. China faces an acute shortage of carrier-qualified pilots. Building carriers is easy. Training pilots who can land on moving flight decks in combat, that takes decades. The USS Gerald R. Ford displaces 100,000 tons. 4 EMALS catapults, 2 A, 1 B nuclear reactors generate over 600 megawatts of electricity. That's triple the power of Nimitz-class carriers, enough to run future energy weapons and advanced sensors. The Ford class features dual-band radar, simultaneous target tracking, fire control, and situational awareness. fully integrated into cooperative engagement capability networks, real-time data sharing across the entire fleet. Every destroyer, every submarine, every aircraft connected. China's Fujian, still working on basic sensor integration. The J-35 stealth fighter hasn't achieved full carrier qualification yet. And here's the brutal reality. US carrier aviation has been battle-tested through decades of combat. Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria. American pilots know what it's like to launch strikes from carriers under fire. They've perfected tactics through real combat. China's carriers? Zero combat experience, training exercises only. American carrier crews train constantly. Damage control drills, firefighting, night operations in heavy seas. Chinese crews are learning these skills now. But learning in peacetime versus executing under fire, that's the difference between theory and survival. But China has one overwhelming advantage: shipbuilding capacity. Chinese shipyards produce warships at a pace unseen since World War II. They've built 3 carriers faster than any nation except the United States during wartime mobilization. The Pentagon admits China's industrial might poses serious challenges. In a prolonged conflict, Beijing could replace losses faster than the US Navy can. China's shipbuilding industry eclipses America's. They launch more destroyers, frigates, and submarines annually than the US and allies combined. By 2030, China expects 435 battle force ships. The US Navy projects 294. American shipyards struggle with aging infrastructure. Chinese shipyards operate 3 shifts, 7 days a week. But here's what Pentagon planners know. Building hulls is easy. Installing systems is hard. Training crews to use those systems effectively, that takes years. China can launch carriers fast, but turning those carriers into effective combat platforms requires time they don't have. Japan responded to the June 2025 dual carrier operation with alarm. Former Defense Minister Minoru Kihara, now Chief Cabinet Secretary, warned China is extensively and rapidly strengthening its military power without transparency. Tokyo increased defense spending to $67 billion, the most significant military expansion since World War II. Japan began developing its own aircraft carriers, converting helicopter destroyers into F-35B platforms. The Philippines strengthened security cooperation with the US, more joint exercises, expanded American access to military bases. Australia accelerated plans for nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS partnership. The entire Indo Pacific militarized in response to Chinese carrier operations. But the US Navy made a more calculated move. They demonstrated something China couldn't match. Multiple American carrier strike groups conducted simultaneous operations across the Pacific. USS Theodore Roosevelt, USS Carl Vinson, USS Abraham Lincoln, USS Ronald Reagan. 4 carriers. 16 strike groups total when you count amphibious ready groups, all operating simultaneously. The message was clear. China can deploy 2 carriers. America can deploy 4 or 6 or all 11 if needed. And American carriers bring something Chinese vessels can't: global logistics networks, replenishment ships, forward bases spanning the Pacific. China's carrier program reveals ambitious goals, but it also exposes critical weaknesses. No global logistics network. Chinese carriers depend on a handful of support ships, limited overseas bases, Cambodia, Solomon Islands, Djibouti. Compare that to the US Navy's century-old network spanning every ocean, hundreds of forward bases, thousands of pre-positioned supplies. Combat experience gap. American carrier strike groups have operated in combat continuously since 1991. Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. US Navy pilots know how to find targets, avoid defenses, deliver weapons, and return safely, under fire. At night, in bad weather. Chinese pilots? They practice on simulators. Nuclear propulsion advantage. American carriers can operate indefinitely, They've spent months on station during combat operations. No refueling needed. Chinese carriers must return to port every few months. That creates predictable patterns, vulnerabilities adversaries can exploit. U.S. response to Chinese carrier expansion accelerated dramatically. The Navy requested $432 million in the 2026 budget for carrier-based hypersonic weapons development. Anti-ship missiles specifically designed to counter Chinese carriers. Long-range anti-ship missile, LRASM. Stealthy, subsonic, but combat-proven. Virginia-class submarines armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles capable of striking Chinese carriers from underwater, undetected, unavoidable. F-35C stealth fighters deployed aboard Ford-class carriers, capable of penetrating Chinese air defenses and striking carriers in port or at sea. The technological advantage matters more than hull count. One Ford-class carrier with F-35s can generate more combat power than 3 Chinese carriers combined. Why? Sortie generation rates. 90 sorties per day from a Ford-class carrier. Chinese carriers? Maybe 50 to 60 at best. That means American carriers can launch more strikes, defend more effectively, and sustain operations longer than Chinese counterparts. Sensor fusion. American carriers share data across entire strike groups. Every radar contact, every missile launch, every submarine detection, instantly available to all platforms. China's attempting to build similar networks, but they're years behind American integration. The Navy also accelerated development of MQ-25 Stingray refueling drones. These unmanned tankers extend carrier strike range by hundreds of miles. No pilot at risk, maximum flexibility, and directed energy weapons. The Ford-class electrical generation capacity supports future laser systems capable of shooting down incoming missiles at the speed of light. No reload time, unlimited magazine depth. China's carriers lack the electrical infrastructure for such systems. They'd need to redesign from the keel up. China will continue building carriers. The Type 004 nuclear-powered carrier could enter service by 2030. Type 005 and Type 006 may follow. Beijing aims to match American carrier numbers by 2035, but American carriers aren't standing still. Future carriers may feature directed energy weapons, railguns, autonomous combat aircraft. The U.S. Navy is developing unmanned carrier-based aircraft that could revolutionize naval aviation. No pilot means longer range, higher G-forces, more weapons payload. China must catch up to where America is today. While America pushes into tomorrow, they're trying to match 1950s-era American capabilities, while the U.S., the Navy, moves toward 2040s technology. The gap may be closing numerically, but technologically, it's widening. China's June 2025 dual carrier deployment sent shockwaves across the Pacific. For the first time, Chinese carriers operated beyond containment lines meant to restrict their movement. It demonstrated ambition. It showcased industrial capacity. It revealed Beijing's determination to challenge U.S. naval dominance. But it also exposed something China didn't want the world to see: the massive technological gap between Chinese carriers and American supercarriers. Conventional propulsion versus nuclear power. Limited pilot training versus decades of combat experience. Restricted logistics versus global networks. China can build carriers faster than America, but building platforms is the easy part. Developing the systems, training the personnel, and gaining the experience to use them effectively, that takes generations. The U.S. Navy maintains 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers, each one more capable than China's entire carrier fleet combined. And that's the revelation that shocked everyone. Not China's growing fleet, but how far behind they still remain despite impressive shipbuilding efforts. If you want more real-world military operations, intelligence-driven stories, and the hidden technology behind America's most classified missions, hit that subscribe button for Battlescope. Don't forget to like this video and share it with anyone who wants to understand the real balance of power in the Pacific. We bring you the stories that mainstream media won't cover, the operations that define modern naval warfare. Drop a comment below. Do you think China can close the technology gap? Or will American experience and innovation keep them ahead for decades? Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, in the Pacific, numbers matter, but technology, experience, and logistics matter more.